In our global series exploring the impacts of COVID-19 on different markets, today we catch up with Jono Vernon-Powell. He's the founder of the very long-established Nomadic Thoughts, and he's also on the council of ATO, which is the UK's equivalent of Cato. Well, you've been in the industry a long time, Jono. Could you possibly have ever imagined anything like the effect that this pandemic has had?
Yes and no. I mean, no, obviously, none of us could predict quite how this was going to hit us so hard and B, how it would unfold. Ironically, I say that about 20 years ago, we at ATO, which is the Association of Independent Tour Operators in the UK, were addressed by a minister of the government and it was the minister in charge of reacting to a pandemic. And I never forget, they stood up and they said, first things first, this is not when, this is when. In other words, forget the if, it's going to come one day. And we all went, oh, wow, it sounded terrifying. And they went through the statistics on how quickly, this is 20 years ago, but they went through how quickly it was going to spread around the world, and it was going to be in days and weeks and not months and years. And at the time, it was frightening enough. But obviously, that not if, but when, the when came really for us in this part of the world 2 decades later. So, no, of course, none of us predicted it coming. And secondly, none of us had quite had any idea the impact, the brutal impact that it was going to have on our businesses and our life in society, and obviously the health of so many vulnerable people.
So amongst your colleagues, what's the feeling? I mean, is it being perceived as an Armageddon moment, or is there resilience that you're seeing and there will be a very strong bounce back?
No, this is, I hesitate to say Armageddon because, obviously the most important thing is the health of people, and our heart goes without saying, goes out to all of those who've been affected by it. And in Britain, in the UK, particularly, we have an appalling statistic of the number of people who died. And that is obviously forefront of everybody's minds and conversations before you say anything. There's a real feeling of government making it up as they go along. Now, it's very easy to blame government. I think we in the UK, sort of aligning the planets hasn't really helped us. And we've come out of the back of, an absolute dogfight of a Brexit political situation. We've got a new government who've arrived in power. Most of the ministers who are in power, the risk of Stanley Flippin, were pushing paper around desks a year ago. So they're hugely inexperienced. They've had the mother of all curveballs thrown at them. And dare I say it, when they've evaluated what's going on in the health situation, mindful of the fact that most of the cabinet got wiped out in the early stages of this, we, the tourism industry, have definitely slipped down the pecking order.
There's obviously a lot of unknowns heading into the recovery period, and one of the biggest is surely consumer sentiment. What are you seeing over there? Are British travellers likely to jump back into travel, or is there an inherent sort of wariness coming?
Well, I think we've got to be aware, firstly, we're in a slightly different time zone than you are, say, down under. And one thing I would like to add to that is I recently saw Dennis Bunaker, the chair of Cato's, video explaining the refunds and credit scenario, and I thought that was terrific.
I'd like to start by saying how very sorry I am that your holiday plans have been cancelled for this year. All of us in the industry are absolutely devastated by the events of COVID-19 and the fact that none of us can travel. We know how important holidays are to us, and can only imagine how important they are to you. Now, there's been a lot of debate and discussion recently about travel credits over refunds and where refunds are being issued, why they're taking so long to be processed. And in this video, I'd like to tackle those questions and provide some answers.
Spot on, non-combative and extremely lucid in its explanation of the situation we're in. And, that I thought we can all take a leaf out of that, because those conversations that we're all having with clients. As far as answering your question as to, will our clients want to travel? I think as long as we can prove to them that the destinations they're going to can A, be got to safely, B, are going to be safe when they get there, and C, can still provide the service and the holiday that they're buying, I think that's the case. And in my mind, I think that the more isolated countries will come out of this quicker. And I would have liked to think in months, rather than towards the back end of the year. If you take, for example, the Indian Ocean, places like Mauritius, Seychelles, the Maldives, which are isolated. The Mauritian government recently put out a thing: we've won the battle but not the war. But tourism is hugely relevant, so they're leading. Funnily enough, the Caribbean islands have been relatively unaffected, in comparison. And then obviously we look down with great heart at the likes of Australia and New Zealand in particular, that has obviously opened up. So as long as the destinations can offer, I really fear for the less developed destinations. I mean, in Africa, the healthcare system in Africa is obviously very fragile, and when it comes to social distancing and how the pandemic plays out in destinations like the Indian subcontinent, those awful images of everyone trying to, when the government came up with this lockdown, which seemed to be utter craziness. How can you lock down if your family effectively live around the rickshaw you work from, or you're on the road or railway tracks? It's just unmanageable. And how that then will play out regarding the pandemic itself, and how far it goes into society. India, the subcontinent, are going to struggle. Africa, we're seeing obviously very alarming figures coming through from Latin America, particularly Brazil, and obviously the US. Obviously that goes hand in hand with the political leadership. So I think there's no one-line answer as to how this is going to play out. I think it's more a case of look and see with each particular destination, and then our job and our responsibility as travel organisers and tour operators is absolutely to lead our clients to the most effective and beneficial and most appropriate holiday that's good for them. And as long as they've got our trust in that, there's no reason why we can't maximise on the opportunities as they come up.
In our part of the world, like everywhere, air capacity and what that's going to look like is a major talking point. You've obviously heard about the Virgin situation here and Qantas contracting and dropping routes. From a European perspective, which is obviously of great interest to Australian travellers, what are you seeing there? Is the capacity going to come back anything like it was, or have we seen the best of air travel?
I don't think we're even out of the blocks yet. I mean, we're very aware of what's happening around the world by the nature of our business and our industry. And I mean, we, for example, in our own little world, had clients travelling in Australia who we had to return home. And, we're still chasing airline refunds and, like the rest of the industry, struggling desperately to claw back monies that we paid out with services that haven't been provided. I don't know. I mean, listening to your question, I sort of get the impression that, I am aware of what's happening with Virgin Australia and Qantas's scenario and the problems and difficulties that they had, for example, Perth Airport, etc. But I think that the biggest issue we've got with in the UK, we're kind of in the middle of it, as in we send people all over the world, and whatever airline is operating, you can bet your life it goes through the UK. So whether people are traveling to the Americas, the Middle East, the Far East, Africa, all parts of Europe, we are affected by the very nature of the fact that capacity of aircraft going through our hubs is huge. And I think it was the World Aviation Organization said that this is about a month ago, they anticipated global flights to be down 72%. Well, I would hazard a guess that that's a lot more now.
There's obviously a huge knock-on effect throughout the travel and allied industries, but right at the front line, the retail travel agents is an interesting one. What's the situation in the UK? Are we going to see a major consolidation there, or what can you tell us?
In the long term, I think travel, retail travel agents, the retail department is it will come out of this in a better position than it went in. Because if nothing else, the public are really going to appreciate their true worth. I mean, I don't think the deal is as much, who's giving refunds. I think it's who's picking the phone up. I mean, if you are Joe Blow who's booked a flight online to go somewhere, good luck. If you can get through to a human being at the airline, you booked it through a travel agent, you'll be on speed dial to a human being who will be communicating and ultimately battling as hard as they can for you. And then that is hugely valuable and will be hugely appreciated going forward, not least when people are trying to plan what to do next.
There's also a lot of conjecture around at the moment about what travel's going to look like when we have recovered, and that means social distancing. It means the number of passengers on a coach, and obviously the seating in airlines, cleanliness in hotels. What are you seeing in that regard? Is there much noise in the UK about that already?
I don't think there's any, personally, I don't think there's any legs in this business of flying half-empty aircraft. It's just not financially viable. And, ultimately, whether there's a seat between you and the next person, in an aircraft where the air is being pumped around the airline, doesn't make sense. I think what will, come out of this will obviously be ultimately whether one can prove if you, the traveller, are healthy, or whether the destination you're going to and the service provider getting you there and looking after you when you get there is healthy.
One of the central tenets of the ATO Charter is sustainable travel and sustainability. Do you see that becoming more and more of a consideration for travellers in the wake of the pandemic?
Yes, I mean, you're quite right. And thank you for highlighting the fact that sustainability and sustainable tourism has always been part of the DNA of ATO. We're very fortunate because we're small independent companies. And the reason we're in this business is because we love it and we care passionately about destinations and the process of getting people to those destinations. One of the, every cloud's got a silver lining. And one of the huge silver linings of COVID-19 has been the drop-off in CO2 emissions across the planet. And, that terrific statement that initially came out, I think about a month after the Chinese pandemic started to unfold, was that Chinese CO2 emissions in April, I think, were down 25%. And those amazing satellite images of Beijing and everywhere else being totally free. Now, that won't have gone unnoticed across the world, and certainly, the airline industry and the questionability on how long we should be traveling, when we should be traveling, why we should be traveling, has to be at the forefront. And I think this is a golden opportunity, particularly if airlines are looking to come out of this COVID-19 situation solvent. And if it is a case of coming out with government help, it's got to be tied to the longevity of going forward in as sustainable way as possible.
Now let's talk about your business. You've been going for 35 years. That's a good innings. What can you tell us about Nomadic Thoughts?
To set the scene, we're a very small independent tour operator. We've been operating 35 years, but we've got a particularly unique business model that we've never actually advertised. We built up, dare I say it, over that period, a very loyal database of clients who travel with us. And 90% of our business is repeat business, and the other 10% is referral. Now, that has really helped us enormously in the last couple of months, because every of the clients that we're dealing with, we know. No one's phoning up saying, look, I booked holiday 46389. Can you look it up in your system? We know them. Invariably, we've been talking to them before they called us. So, I don't take anything for granted. And, it hasn't been easy. But, back to my mantra of communication is king. We have been in a fortunate position because of the small business model that we have to be able to communicate directly with our clients and with our suppliers. And, the suppliers, we get it firsthand what's happening in the destinations. And, we very much communicate equally with them. And this obviously plays out enormously when it comes to postponements. And when I say 95% of our clients, it's actually more, 99% of our clients have postponed. And that's from end of March, April, May, June, July, August, to the end of September, have all postponed into next year. Now, the overriding impact is, we're in this business because we love it and we want to stay in it. Can I put my hand on my heart and say we'll be here in 2 years? No, absolutely not. No one can. In the industry we're in, it's an incredibly precarious situation. If I look at all the advanced bookings we've got, just in revenue that we've taken to date going forward over, say, the next 12 months, well, 40% of that we've taken because of deposits that we bought airline tickets, we paid deposits on safari camps and lodges, what have you. 40% of the money we've received, we've already paid out on, and that's going forward to next year. Aside from the sort of 12-week period, say, where people travel who were due to travel when COVID-19 broke out at the end of February, early March, we paid everyone out in full there by and large. And on the back of that, we're still trying to claw back money. We've got airlines that owe us tens of thousands. We've got ground suppliers that owe us tens of thousands, and I hope we're going to get it back, and I hope we're going to be able to provide it. The good news from the client's perspective is that their money is safe because it's all ring fenced by our ATOL license, which is, on the one hand, great, but on the other hand, has extra complications and stresses of this side of the world when it comes to safeguarding your client's money and your own business's money. But yes, I'm confident that the suppliers we have that we built up over the years will see this through. But can I put my hand on my heart and say they will? No. What percentage will go down? Well, I'm not sure. But if a heavy percentage can go down, we're going to go down with them. It's as simple as that. And good night, Vienna. But we're all in this situation across the world, whatever business we're in, and whatever environment we're operating in. Yeah, the future's bright. I think it's just a case we need to get through this, and it's a big get through.
Well, let's hope it's not good night, Vienna. Thank you very much. That gave us a great insight into what's happening in your part of the world. And I think the takeaway is probably that Australia is probably a little further advanced in recovering, I guess. That was a recurrent theme that you were talking about, but I guess we just have to wait and see.
Thank you very much for listening to me. And good luck. And bring on those ashes, eh? We want them back. All right.